and welcome to this month's Anti-Racism Task Force meeting. And I'm going to call our meeting to order right now at 7:02, and we are being recorded. And let's go ahead and start with the approval of the minutes from January 6th. If there are any changes or does anybody have any thing they'd like to add or subtract from those meeting minutes?
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
Okay, we have a motion to approve the minutes, and we have a second, it looks like, from Katie. All of those all of those in favor, I can't see Carla's hand. If anyone is opposed, no opposed, so it's unanimous to approve the meetings from January 6th. And now we're on to the next item, presentation of the curriculum work. And who's providing that? Is that you, Datula?
Oh, no, sorry. I was waving to a wonderful child.
Oh.
A wonderful member of our community. Hello.
Who is giving the presentation for the curriculum work?
So I hope that's not me giving a presentation. I was told that you guys would like us to join, myself, the director of the Charahoe Tech, to talk about curriculum, but
right. For criminal justice, well, this is what the information that I had from the agenda was from the criminal justice and the health careers curriculum.
Okay.
So, Mr. Jerry,
Yes.
why don't you go ahead and tell us about those programs at the Career and Tech?
Okay. So we have, I can kind of give you guys a basic overview of the career and technical programs. And then, I have Lieutenant Robert Wild here with me from the criminal justice program. Bethany McLeod, our instructor from the health careers program, is actually in an instructor training program right now that meets tonight. So she said if she was able to get out of that in time, she would jump into this. She has the information for the Zoom, and she's just a text away from any heavy questions that come in. But we have, at the Career and Technical Center, we have 21 programs. There are 4-year programs, and we accept students from all over Southern Rhode Island. Currently, we have about 850 students that are designated as career and tech students out of the 1,100 and change at the school. So we have a pretty robust system. We transport about 200 students a day from out of district to the Career and Technical Center to be part of our programs. Those students are automatically enrolled as Charahoe High School students, and they receive a diploma from Charahoe Regional High School, one of the top high schools in Rhode Island, I would say, top 10% in the country. So we're excited about that opportunity to bring kids into our district that really are passionate about a career and technical program, as well as an outstanding academic program. So those students that are in our programs, just to paint you a little picture of their typical day, they are still on track for a high school diploma, taking their math, science, English, social studies, PE, all those high school requirements. It's just that one block a day, they're over in their career and technical program receiving specific training in a specific area of focus, whether that's, and we can use the example, criminal justice. So freshman year, they're in criminal justice 1 with their math, science, English, social studies, so on and so forth. And then they proceed their second year to criminal justice 2. And Sabrina, right? I'm just looking at you. Criminal justice, are you 4 already?
Yeah, I'm in my last year.
Oh my goodness. Sabrina is one of our outstanding criminal justice students in level 4. So she's progressed through 4 years of the program. I'm just going to go out on a limb, Sabrina, and say you've taken at least one course at the honors level at Charahoe High School. So just proof right there that you're able to take a career and technical program and honors level courses. That world did not exist 15 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago. You were either a college prep kid on your way to college, or you were a career and technical kid because you couldn't cut it and we didn't think you were going to make it to the next level. So now we have wonderful students like Sabrina who are going through the program at an honors pace. I'm not going to make you say you took an AP class, but I'm sure you're capable of taking an AP class as well, and still enroll in a career and tech program. So, you know, two of the programs we have are criminal justice, health careers. Our criminal justice program is a national award-winning program. It's hands down our most popular program at Charahoe. We often hit we have Lieutenant Wild, about 100 students in the program, give or take, where our typical career and technical programs usually they max out around 50 to 60 students. So we have 2 instructors, both retired police officers from the North Providence Police Department. Deputy Chief Chris Calise is also an instructor in the program, and he's unable to make it tonight. So I'm not sure how in depth you would like us to go with the program. That's kind of a general overview. I can see we have a hand raised, so feel free to jump in.
Go ahead, Lisa. And then I think it was Katie. Did you also have your hand raised? Lisa, then Katie.
So Mr. Awe, thank you for coming. Lieutenant Wild, thank you so much for being here tonight. I think that maybe we should just give you a little bit of context around the invitation.
Yeah.
Right? So if you haven't been following, but I think that you both have quite closely. So, right, this is the Anti-Racist Task Force, and the goal, right, of this task force is to examine Charahoe's policies, practices, and curriculum through the lens of diversity, equity, and inclusion. There are subcommittees that are doing that work in great detail with the express purpose of going back to the school committee with recommendations for improvements and changes to address issues of diversity, inclusion, and equity within our system. So it was from that framework that we've asked you to come. Clearly, criminal justice is an incredibly relevant and emotional topic. And we have subcommittees examining curriculum and trying to determine where are we as a district, right? From what lens are we approaching criminal justice and Black lives within our criminal justice program? And what more can you tell us about where we are, but also as the internal experts, where we really need to grow and go. So that was the context of the invitation, to help give us a baseline, and then also let those subcommittees start to think more critically about what we need to do as a district to make sure that we're producing students that are not only focused on, right, the criminality piece, right, the law enforcement piece, but on the justice piece.
So, am I still on? Okay, so we have adopted a curriculum from Roger Williams University. That curriculum was brought in and I don't want to say rewritten or revised, but adopted to Charahoe standards and presented and approved by the Charahoe District Curriculum Planning Committee years ago. So this curriculum is always a live document. It's always under review. Lieutenant Wild, I know we mentioned justice, and I know you guys have done very in-depth work with case law, and it's not just a how to be a police officer program, and you can probably comment on that a little better than I could.
Well, basically the program, it's not about becoming a police officer. There's all career fields in the criminal justice program to involve law enforcement, the courts, corrections, private investigations, federal levels of jobs, forensic science, not just law, and everybody says criminal justice is just, that's not where just police. It's all aspects of the criminal justice field. And that's what we start with year one by introducing all of these career fields to the students. So we don't just focus in on, or we want local police. That's not what we're all about. I mean, when I first took this job, my main goal was, I wanted to look at young kids and I wanted to shape their minds to the type of officers that we need out there on the street today. Because I came from the planning and recruitment departments in North Province, and so did Chris Calise. And we figured we got to change the mindset of these young kids who are going to become police officers. And that was our first focus. And then we went into the other career fields and we said, well, not just law enforcement, let's get into the courts. Kids who want to become attorneys, they want to become private investigators, DCYF investigators, juvenile law, all types of career fields in criminal justice, and the federal level also. And we push the federal level law enforcement and the federal level criminal justice program out there to all of our students. So we don't just focus in on police. That's just the baseline. And in order to do this, we have to teach almost civics all over again, from the case law, the Bill of Rights. Our students are taught the Bill of Rights from the 9th grade all the way to their senior year on what the amendments mean and how they affect everyday life. And when we talk about anti-racism, most of these cases that we work on are African Americans. So the kids are seeing front-hand social injustices at a young age. In the 60s, in the 70s, in the 80s, the 90s, and even now. So we go through all of this with the kids. We don't put our spin on it. We want our kids, first of all, we want our students to develop their own opinions and their own personalities. And Sabrina will tell you, in our class, everybody's opinion matters. And that's what we're very, very big on that. We don't care where you are politically. We don't care about any of that. It's everybody in that classroom matters. And that's very important in our classroom. Sabrina, are you agree with me on that, Sabrina?
Yeah, definitely. I feel like the class really gives everyone an opportunity to learn about different aspects of the criminal justice field. And I mean, I went into it knowing I didn't want to be a police officer, but I knew I wanted to do something to help people legally. And, not everyone in our class agrees with my political viewpoints. And there have been some scuttlebutt arguments about that. But in the end, we all just are happy to learn about the different things. Lieutenant's a really great teacher, and he's willing to have any discussion that we want to have. So it's perfect.
One of the biggest cases, the Plessy versus Ferguson, we go into that, the 14th Amendment, unbelievable. And then we go into Brown versus education. These are cases that are landmark decisions that my students know better than pretty much anybody else in that school, because this is massive and this is important case law to us. So this is what we teach in our class. We talk about, diversity. This, one of the lessons we just did last week, we did hate crimes, and we did a massive presentation on, the kids are actually going to be doing it next week. We did a whole lesson on hate crimes, where hate comes from and how it affects this country in major cases that are out there. This is what the seniors just did. There's still, when we have another lesson coming up on cultural diversity. So there are all types of lessons. We don't focus just on criminal justice in this program. We focus on everything in the criminal justice field. Anybody have any questions so far? I mean, my students love it. We make the class fun, and we talk about some tough subjects, especially in today's society. And kids want to, they want to vent and they want to voice their opinion. You know what? I welcome that. I welcome their opinion in my class. Doesn't matter where you stand. I welcome you. I want to hear from you. Somebody
Katie,
had a
I think
question?
you had Katie had her hand raised. I don't know if you still had a question. I can't see you right now. If not, then Joe had his hand raised.
Lieutenant, I introduced myself, Joe Reddish. I'm actually the chair of the Commission on Prejudice and Bias,
Yep.
which oversees the hate crimes and sensitivity training for all law enforcement with the Attorney General's office. So I'm very happy to hear that you have that part of your curriculum. I would love probably to learn more, connect you with our organization, so that there's a pass through of knowing what's starting in the early years to what's, when they actually go through the academy, because every new academy recruit has to go through that program. And then we have a follow-up program that exist, but I don't think that from our side that we knew this kind of training was taking place at the front end level of what you guys are doing in the criminal justice program at the high school level. So I think that's going to be a great tie together. I don't know if the Attorney General, is the Attorney General aware that you do this training?
Well, I know, I was an instructor at the police academy before I retired from North Providence. So, and I saw a lot of the stuff that they taught up there, and a lot of my lessons come directly from what we were in the academy, what they should be taught in the academy. And this is when I talked about young recruits shaping their minds at an early age. This is what we're talking about, shaping these young minds in high school as they decide to move on into these career fields. So yeah, I don't know if the Attorney General's changed in the last couple of years, so I don't know if the Attorney General is aware of it or not.
Yeah, so I'll just give you a name real quick. Keith Hoffman oversees the training from the Attorney General's office and coordinates with my coordinator, Jody Glass. So probably should connect you guys so they can share consistency and information and so on. Plus, I'm sure they would love to come down and be a guest speaker.
Absolutely, you're more than welcome.
With your classes and so on. So
yeah, that'd be great. I'd love that. That would be perfect for the class.
Great.
And Joe, we can connect and try to get everyone connected, whether it's through a Zoom this year or moving forward next year, year after, getting a strong connection with the community, because that's important to us too.
Yeah, no,
bringing in the professionals, and that's what makes these programs so valuable, is bringing in the professionals that are in front of the kids teaching, but also their connections within industry. Meetings like this, making more connections as well.
Yeah. And just so you guys have it for edification, if you go to a website, calloutprejudiceRI.org, that's our website, and then it also launches into our Facebook, which is the Commission on Prejudice and Bias. So we post on a regular basis things going on in the community, such as the Burrillville challenges, Pontigansett with, having the inappropriate name. Smithfield, town of Smithfield right now is having a challenge because of hate crime, graffiti and things like that. So we connect, and then we also take reports of people who felt that they've been prejudiced against. So I think it'd be a good combination of educational addition.
Great.
I have a question, Lieutenant or Mr. Oth. What is, you said they have about 100 students within this criminal justice program. So what does the class look like in terms of diversity, as far as women, minorities? What is the ratio within this class that you've noticed, like who participates in this class?
We have Lieutenant, I would say we probably have about an even split, male, female, maybe slightly geared towards the male side.
When we first started out, we were dominated by the females. We were dominated.
Looking at applications coming in the last couple of years.
Now it's starting to even itself out a little bit. Yes.
People like Sabrina get in the room, it helps.
Yes. Yes.
I mean, ethnicities in our region, we probably follow the pattern of the Charahoe Regional School District. I would say it's consistent with those numbers.
So do you have any minorities within this program, or you would
we have had minorities. Yes, absolutely. I have a young lady, Brianna Randolph, that graduated one of my first classes in law school. So doing excellent, great student, one of my very first students I ever had. So yeah, we have had minorities in the class. You know what, I wish I had more, because I need that balance. You know what I mean? I need to get that balance in my classroom.
Well, if you would have had it 20 years ago when I was there.
Never too late to go back.
Sure.
But if this committee needs specific numbers, that's a request that's made, I can provide that.
Absolutely. It would probably be requested from one of our subcommittees.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah.
And we will later on in this meet have a breakdown of the subcommittees, and each one of them will give a report. And I'm sure that they're listening attentively now, so they know that they can reach out to you for that information.
Can I say one thing? You talk about the curriculum that we have there. That curriculum is Roger Williams based curriculum. And when it was given to myself back in 2012, that curriculum would basically cover a semester. So what we've done is we've added probably 40 to 45 more lessons onto that curriculum. So what you see is you see the basic curriculum for Roger Williams' Intro to Criminal Justice class. We've gone way far and above what that curriculum offers. And we can give you all the lessons that we teach in our classroom. If you need that. I mean, we have no problem with giving you all that information. It's just above and beyond what you see on that curriculum right there. It's more in-depth lessons.
Yes, sir, Mr. Reddish.
One last thing I'd like to share, which is a positive thing for you. I'm also part of community2000.org, which is a scholarship organization for the Char Hill School District's graduates. And we do have a scholarship that's geared towards criminal justice. So if you have young people that are going on to the next level, make sure they apply for that, because we don't have enough of applicants typically.
Okay.
Copy that, Sabrina. And Donis, was that a hand raise? Yes, ma'am.
Yes, I was using all the reactions. Thank you for being here tonight and spending some time with us this evening. What would you say would be the receptiveness of the program to more community involvement, or if there already is what you feel is robust community input from the broader kind of Chariho community? If that's already baked into the curriculum, I'd be really interested to hear a little bit more about that. And if it's not, what do you think the receptiveness would be to community review or discussion or some kind of implementation into the curriculum that includes community voices?
So all career and tech students, regardless of what program you're in now, are required to participate in 80 hours of work-based learning experience. So that can be done through an internship, that can be done through a service learning project, or that can be done through an industry project. It can also be done other ways, but those are the three main areas that our criminal justice students obtain these 80 hours. We do have relationships with the local police departments. We have an Explorers program through the Westerly Police that the kids work in the summer. We have other internships available as well. So there are opportunities for the students at a minimum to complete 80 hours of the work-based learning. We're always looking for more. You know, by no means are we saying, hey, we checked that box, we're good, next question. You know, we have, Craig McKenzie and I, Craig McKenzie, Andrea Spaz and I, the three administrators at the high school. This is like our baby. This is our goal, to try to knock down the walls right now and bring in the community, put our kids out in the community, and almost model like the community college model, where your first 2 years, if you're at Chariho and you're doing things the right way, you've knocked out your graduation requirements, you're passing your courses, you're well on your way to graduation. Well, now how creative can we get? How can we get you out in the community earning credits? What can you give back to the community? So we definitely are looking for ways to expand on that. Lieutenant Weil can probably talk about a couple ways he's worked with the community or people he's had into his classroom, but we're definitely looking for ways to expand that.
Yeah, we've had guest speakers come in. We've had guest speakers from the Attorney General's office come in. We've had judges come into the classroom, local police officers come into the classroom. I have a contact with the crime lab at URI. Dennis Hilliard's a good friend of mine. I completed his BCI training course over there. So we have reached out, the Department of Health, Andy Juicy up there, we've reached out with them. So we do have community partners we've used before, but we can always use more help, always.
Joe?
Yeah, have you had members of marginalized communities come in and talk about inexperience? And so somebody who has had a racist experience or something like that, have you had anybody like that come in?
No, sir, I've never had anybody come in and talk like in the class about that.
Okay.
If
so
if I did, so if I did something like that, I'd have to make sure it was okay with the school, my director, superintendent, before I
Right.
did anything like that, yeah.
Right, and so one of the connections we can make through the commission is that is part of the curriculum that we have with law enforcement when we do the trainings at the academies, is that we have set up speakers so that they hear, what an experience is like. Because a lot of times these officers, potential officers, have gotten all this way in life and they've never heard really what somebody's who's had an experience. For example, we have a gentleman that comes in who escaped from, the Southern Africa through the woods. He was a reporter, had been beaten, but he explained why he's afraid of law enforcement. And that was very eye-opening. He says, I'm not afraid of you, but my experience says that when I see an authoritarian officer, I get tense. I can literally, to the point he carries a sport coat in the back of his car. So whenever he's driving in his car, he drives with that so that he's respected a little bit more if he gets pulled over. So I think adding some of those conversations in for people to hear, especially the young people at a young age, can provide them even a more robust experience.
That's a good recommendation.
I think that'd be an eye-opening experience for the students. Hear something like that.
Definitely a conversation starter. Elisa, did I see your hand raised?
Yeah, just to add to the conversation, when we talk about anti-racism, and we want to look at systemic changes, right? That's really what we're talking about when we say bringing in speakers. And we could think, okay, you've had attorney generals come in, you've had guest speakers, right? And then we think, okay, well, how many BIPOC guest speakers have you had? Oh, I might need permission, right? Those are some of the systemic changes that this group is hoping to make and partner with you around to even change that mindset, right? That should be part of the experience, because that, Lieutenant Wild said some really wonderful things earlier about your pedagogy, right? That you talk about the everyday life, that everybody in the class matters. Pedagogically, yes, but the everyday life for a BIPOC member of the community is not the everyday life of your students if you have no BIPOC students in that program. So, right, so we have to embed it. And so this is a great conversation, Jerry, around a systemic change, right? Versus, teaching students to be anti-racist, but systemically, if that becomes part of the curriculum, right, now we're looking at long-lasting change. So I'm quite sure that, as Joe mentioned, that subcommittee is going to want to connect around that, and certainly something on the school committee that I'd be a huge proponent of.
Yeah, I think these are the type of recommendations that the school committee is probably looking to come out of a group like this, because these are things that when we're in the trenches day to day and we're Lieutenant Wild hears from me, make sure you're following your curriculum, right? That's what he's hired to do. He's hired to follow his curriculum. Now let's say, well, let's take a look at the curriculum, and are there changes at that level that we can make? So that's where recommendations from this committee could have a significant impact on the daily instruction to the students.
Katie, I see your hand again. Katie.
Yes. So I had to step away for a moment, my apologies, but I didn't know if anyone had said anything about all of the pathways and how each group has an advisory board as well. Maybe the terminology is not correct, but those are other ways for community engagement.
And so our advisory boards are now at the state level.
I see.
It's really been a wonderful thing for the projection of career in tech over the last 5 years, because there's a statewide system in place that's developed expectations and standards. So that would be the next level of trying to get language into state level standards that need to be addressed from each program. But some of the programs have still held on to their advisory boards locally. When I say locally, I mean the Chariho region, because of the value that they have over over hiring and internships and on-the-job placement. And culinary arts is probably a good example of that, where she still maintains her local advisory because it just adds so much benefit to the program.
Katie, did that answer your question?
Yeah, I just wanted the group to know
To know
of
about
the
it.
advisory board and get a refresher myself.
I don't see anybody else's hand raised. Did anybody else have any comments or questions? Go ahead, Sabrina.
I'll say something really quick. So, in terms of diversity at our school and within the criminal justice program, you don't see a lot of diversity in our school, but I was speaking to a student who actually graduated last year who is of African American descent, and he was explaining to me a situation where a student at Charahoe wasn't really like harassing him for his skin color, but he was just, it was the ignorance behind the other student's comment that really bothered him. And I made this documentary about fighting racism and I had interviewed him about it. And he explained that within the interview I did with him. But I think it's important in terms of criminal justice, if even just that one part of the school realizes that you kind of have to step up when it comes to racism. And sometimes, even if our program is predominantly white students, we have to be the ones to say, no, that's not right. So most of our job within the school and the community is just stepping up and being that better, bigger person and really trying to fight racism. Some people don't understand that, but when it comes to myself and a lot of the kids I work with in the class, they all are on the same page and agree that, we kind of have to be like the officers of the school and make sure that everyone is safe and everyone is like feels comfortable in the school community, because school is a horrible place to go to feel uncomfortable, because it's the one place you're supposed to be learning, not distracted by, other factors. And, in this day and age, your skin color should not affect your educational experience. And unfortunately, it still does for so many people. And I think it's important that the education that students get, not only in career and tech, but in the entirety of Charahoe, reflects on that. And everyone is taught that, you need to just accept people for who they are.
I need to ask you a question. I would like to come to your inauguration when you get there. But do you know, and and for all the other students that may be here, do you know what avenues that you have for reporting if you see something where you're supposed to say something? Are you made aware of that? Or do you think that's something that needs to have a greater attention brought to it?
Well, for me personally, I'm very comfortable and close with Mr. Wild, so I would tell him anything and have him kind of handle it for me. And I have a pretty strong relationship with all of the administrators. But in terms of, I think every student has a teacher they're comfortable with. So as long as you have that, but I feel like, everyone can always go to admin. They're a very nice and understanding group of people and, always respond to emails quickly, everything like that. So I would say I don't personally know of anywhere or anyone that you would go to for that particular type of issue, but I'm sure it's available.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
So we just kind of clarified that a little bit. I probably couldn't have said it any better than
Saw your
that.
hand also, Jane.
Oh, I'm sorry, Jane. Did you want to go? I'm
No,
not
I think
following.
you were going to say the same thing. Go ahead, Jerry.
Well, we do have an anonymous tip line that students can use that I believe it was the beginning of last year
Right.
that we started that. And we really front loaded that with a lot of messaging. We did training on it through our advisories. We did parental training on it. I would probably go out on a limb and say that training has taken a slight backseat to all of the other training that's been happening this year with COVID. But that is not something that is ignored. It is still messaged, but probably not at the level it was messaged last year. But students are fortunate enough to have you know, a lot of kids have their career and tech program, which is nice. And you know, I can just echo what Sabrina said about we make ourselves available. Are we perfect? No. Could we improve? Yes. But we do have a system in place, a structured system in place.
We were made aware of that. Thankfully, we were. But I asked that question specifically to a student to find out how well that information is, and
Yeah.
bring a light again to the fact that we probably need to make sure that that information gets to them on a regular basis so that it's second nature. Miss Daly.
It's just, it's only for the campus, so it's only for grades 5 through 12 students, for the anonymous tip, just to make sure that's clear. And the other thing is we did put in, probably, gosh, maybe 3 years ago, the years are running together, but a whole bystander curriculum that we did implement in the health curriculum because of just what Sabrina was speaking about. You know, it's one thing to report it because it happened to you, but it's stronger if your peers are supporting you. So when something does happen, you know, students stand up and say, that's not right. And so that is something that we did add into the curriculum, the health curriculum, in the last few years. Just thought I'd throw that out there. So, you know, maybe that's not enough. Maybe it hasn't worked, but that is something that we have worked on.
Thank you. If there are any more questions in this area of our agenda?
Chair, I think while we have Mr. Auth, we might want to also just give him an opportunity to address the health career piece as it pertains to BIPOC as well, right? Because as we know, there's a discrepancy in access to healthcare, mental health care for our BIPOC community. So Mr. Auth, I think you said that one of our lead instructors was not able to attend, but can you speak similarly, as we just did with criminal justice, to what some of the conversations in the curriculum, speakers, et cetera, as it pertains to healthcare?
I met with Bethany McLeod, our instructor, just to talk about, hey, Bethany, if you can't make it, what are some of the things you'd like me to talk about? So our 4-year program has a focus of the first year is an introductory to the health careers profession and all the different avenues that a student could take entering that field. So it's more of a career exploration, and it's an overview of the body systems, preparing them for year 2, which begins their CNA training. So years 2 and 3 is focused on the skill development and the knowledge base to obtain their CNA certification by the end of year 3. And then the 4th year is the students get to go on a specific path of interest, whether that's to get their EMT certification, their pharmacy tech certification, or they can choose to go directly into an internship that they are able to obtain, and one that fits their interest. So if you're interested in physical therapy, and you can find a physical therapist, instead of going to health careers senior year, you're going to do your internship with a physical therapist during class time. So it's a good system. It's one of our more direct approaches to personalizing your learning for a career and tech program. So when I asked her, hey, we've been invited to this meeting, what are some of the things that we can talk about? And she says that in year 2, they do start to talk about cultural differences, and that is introduced in year 2. She talks about ethnic differences, religious rights, patient rights, and that's carried out in everything they do through years 2, 3, and 4. So they do have conversations regarding, differences between people, and what their religious beliefs and their patient rights, and they do make sure that they address those. And they said it's embedded into every unit they study.
So that's part of that.
You broke up a little bit there. I'm not sure if anyone else
Broke
heard
up,
that.
Dawn.
Am I clear?
Got you there.
Yes.
Yep.
So what she's teaching about cultural and ethnic differences is based on curriculum that she is using.
Yeah, it's embedded in the learning activities.
And I imagine you're not familiar with exactly like which cultures or ethnic differences like they're talking about.
I don't have that depth of knowledge right now. I was really hoping she could be here for that to address that right now. But like I said, she's in her own teacher preparation program. She's in her second year. We got her right from South County Hospital. She was formerly a nurse at South County Hospital.
Is she someone that somebody from our subcommittee could reach out to pertaining to the curriculum?
I think that'd be a good idea. We can set something up during the school day or even one of the evenings.
Dawn, did you have anything else to add?
No, but I apologize that I came in late. Could I ask one more quick question as far as the criminal justice? You may have answered it, but am I breaking up again?
No, you're clear. Go for it.
Oh, okay. The faces is looking like I might have been breaking up. Are like cultural differences and stuff taught within your criminal justice class as well?
Lieutenant Wild, are you still here to address that question? I can see that your camera's off and you are on mute, just so you know. So I don't want to speak for Lieutenant Wild. So we can, again, have that conversation and report back to this committee if you think that'd be helpful.
I don't mind answering that
Oh,
question.
Serena!
So yeah, no, cultural education, everything like that is definitely taught. I would say it could be taught more and brought into different aspects of what we're learning, but it's definitely a prominent aspect of what we learn. I'd say it's in like the top part, like one of the top things we talk about in class. And even if it's not built into the curriculum, it's something that at least one student will bring up, and then we'll have a whole class discussion on it. Lieutenant in our class is like really big on having discussions and everyone's voices and opinions being heard, and that's always a big part of it.
And then Thon, one of the things I suggested is that they partner with the Commission on Prejudice and Bias and invite marginalized speakers in from different areas who've had different experiences. So the students have the opportunity to kind of really engage with frontline individuals who've had something happen to them, whether it's LGBTQ, could be indigenous, it could be somebody from out of the country. But we have a whole series of speakers that we utilize in the police academy trainings that I'm sure we'd be glad to share with them.
I heard that, John. I thought it was a great idea.
May I ask Sabrina a question?
Go for
Absolutely.
it.
So Sabrina, you mentioned you made a documentary. You were talking about the African-American student. Can you tell us a little bit more about that? Did you just do that for class? Did you do it for yourself? Or did you do it for the school?
So that was a peak of quarantine project. So I was just getting a little bored, sitting at home doing nothing, and I'm used to having a very go lifestyle. So it was around the time where, George Floyd was murdered and a lot of protests were happening around the country. And I personally didn't feel safe with COVID happening, going out to any protests. I know a lot of people were being safe wearing masks and everything, but that was really the time where we didn't know everything about COVID, and I just didn't want to risk it for myself and my family. So I was thinking of ways that I could, peacefully protest from a technology standpoint. And I was actually on TikTok, and this girl posted a video that had like 12 million views, and it was just speaking on police violence. And it was a 60-second video that literally made me cry. And I was like, so how can I expand on this? So I came up with this idea to create a documentary. It's called This is America, Once Again, A Nation Divided. and I interviewed like 25 people, I think, and I talked to Lieutenant Wild about a police perspective, and a few other people that I know that live in my neighborhood and stuff like that that are police officers. I expanded it from New England to people I know from all over, and it was really nice to get those perspectives. It didn't have anything to do with school or school projects or anything like that, but all of my teachers saw it and were really supportive of it. And it was a really nice project because I actually was able to connect with some students from Charahoe that I wasn't necessarily close with that just reached out to me and were like, oh, I heard you're doing this. Can I be interviewed and stuff like that? And everyone was so open to speaking their minds, and it was just like a safe space for people to let their opinions and feelings go about racism.
Thank you.
Is it Luca? Did I say your name correctly?
Yeah, you did.
Okay.
I
see
just
your
want to tell Sabrina that I just found the documentary on YouTube and I plan on watching it tonight.
Thank you.
Of course.
Sabrina, actually, Luca just answered my question, which was, is it available to the public? Could you please gather up that link and send it to the chair of the Anti-Racism Task Force, which is Maya, and that way she can view it and perhaps distribute it to the committee.
Definitely, I'd love to do that.
Thank you so much.
Does anybody else have any other questions?
I was just going to say that I'm going to have to hop off because I have a few things to do, but it was really nice attending and I plan on being in the next meeting.
Thank you. Please come back. Okay. I think we should move on to it. We are on to now our next agenda item, which is the discussion of the role of this task force as it relates to current events.
I can kick that off. I asked for that to be on the agenda. Our last meeting, if folks remember, was January 6th. And because this task force was created in an official capacity under the school committee, we operate by, the open meetings laws. We cannot talk about anything outside of the agenda items. So I know it felt uncomfortable sitting here talking about the incredibly important work that we're all doing with everything else going on in the world and not having a place to talk about that. I do know, though, that we came together for a very specific purpose about, through that lens of equity, diversity, and justice as it pertains to the school district. But obviously we know that our school district doesn't operate outside of that vacuum, so everything that's happening in the real world obviously intersects very directly. So I just wanted to open, a quick discussion to talk about, what is our role as far as talking about current events? Is it to provide recommendations to how the school can talk about this? Is that outside of our wheelhouse? Just kind of wanted to get thoughts on that.
As Stan just shared, when it came up at our meeting that we had this week, and that what we really devise is everything we do today needs to also incorporate current events so that once we get this process done, that we're current with what's going on in our world. And I think that's kind of really what we want to make sure that as a group, if that makes sense, and that if it does, then we make sure that we just make sure we're constantly retooling, responding to whatever comes up next.
Yes.
Sorry, I was reaching for my mute button. So that kind of rolls me back into sort of the last conversation, and just I have curiosity about how in the criminal justice group they include discussions about defunding police and what that looks like, or what that could look like, or things of that nature. Because I think people hear that term and they get really scared or frustrated because they envision it being one way, and in reality it's about allocating resources to the communities and things that we need, in addition to law enforcement and whatnot. I don't know if Jerry is still around, or you want to speak about that at all.
Hi, I'm sorry. I was playing dad for a second. I missed.
That's okay.
I'll be brutally honest.
That's all
If you
right.
could repeat the question.
So I was just, per what Dan was saying and Joe was saying about, incorporating current events into the curriculum, I was just curious about how the conversation, or if the conversation has been happening in the criminal justice space, to talk about what it means to defund police and what that could look like, or what it should look like. And, is there any sort of like wiggle room there, or room for discussion and debate and things like that?
I mean, I think you heard from Sabrina about, the conversation that happens in the classroom every day. I wouldn't be able to specifically talk about if that conversation happened. And I don't know how many times we can say Sabrina in a meeting, but you would know that if that specific conversation took place. I know they talk about current events all the time. I mean, anything that's happening in the news, anything current that's happening, I know there's at least a discussion about it. But have they talked about that specific topic? I couldn't answer that right now. But it's something that, if that's something that this committee feels is important enough to address a topic of that, then that's, a recommendation to the school committee that I think this committee should make.
Katie, you also had your hand raised. Just kidding. Sabrina, did you want to address that if you all have had this discussion?
Yeah, definitely. So I would say it's not a part of the curriculum. I feel like in the current event standpoint, we have talked about it a little bit, but it's been more of like a myself, another student, and lieutenant discussion, not really a whole class thing. It really, with the things that we've been doing this year, we did a unit on like the code of ethics and, policing and stuff like that. But for some reason, that discussion didn't really come up. I mean, for me, I felt like there's a lot of kids in our class that would have, it is an open space for discussion, but I just felt like that was like a whole other issue, and I really didn't want to be the one to bring it up. I was kind of scared that they would like jump down my throat and be like, well, you hate the police, how can you be in criminal justice? And I'm like, it's not really the case. I don't hate the police. I just think it just needs some reform. And I definitely agree that, the term defund the police can be heard and, in a way that's not how it is, and that in particular, like educating people on what defund the police really means and what that phrase really stands for, I think that would be important to add into the curriculum.
And Sabrina, just to add from the commission level, we have that conversation quite often. It was a little bit more intense this last time. I actually was very pleased that we had almost 25 of the 39 chiefs in the state of Rhode Island on my commission call. One of our reps, who's part of the commission, we only have 1 out of 6 that actually show up for the call. She made a statement about, well, I understand this is taking place, but you need to do more. I don't think there's been any change from 28 years ago. Where's the proof and whatever? And it led to an interesting conversation because everything the commission in the state of Rhode Island does is with grants. And so I pushed back to the legislative branch at that moment. And I said, well, that's a great idea. I says, you mandated this commission and we do a lot with grants. I says, how about we become a budget line and let's make this important to the state of Rhode Island? And so I think that piece I will push down to the educational level too for the schools when I'm having the further conversations with her with regards to that, because we realize that it's not just law enforcement, it's community challenges too. And that we need to educate our communities about each other, you know, whether it's down here in Charho, learning more about the indigenous groups and them learning about Irish groups or German groups or Portuguese. You go up to Providence, a whole different aspect of what the biases are that exist between the groups. So I think at some point in time, yes, you probably want to add that to your curriculum, but it's being thought at a higher level too, to say, okay, we got to accept we made improvements and there's always going to need be improvements, but it takes everybody feeling comfortable to engage in those conversations and raise their hand when there's a problem. And so just not at the student level where I understand where you might be anxious about saying something, it's at the adult level too, across the board, across the state, where people aren't comfortable saying, this is not right, or this is how I feel, or whatever, and so on. So there's opportunity out there.
Caleb, I see your hand raised.
Yeah, thank you. Just briefly, ditto to what Joe was saying, and I think building space for difficult dialogue into curriculums is a really important piece of this work. I also think in terms of community involvement, like Mr. Roth was talking about, it can be really powerful to have officers come in and debate these issues. I have a friend who is definitely in the minority in his department, but he's an active officer who cares about doing his work, and he's actually in support of defunding the police, and he has his own, you know, piece of why he believes in that and the tasks they're asked to do all the time and whether or not we can redistribute things. And you know, so I think that it's really hard stuff to discuss, and I think that's all the more reason to build some structures around it to make it safe and discuss it. And you know, I don't think you know, with all the work the school's already doing, I don't want to make it harder. I want to think thoughtfully about bring people in and having that discussion.
Katie, I see.
So I just also wanted to make the point that I hear the importance and understand why we ask criminal justice and health careers to come in, but I'm wondering if it's also some important community conversations that need to be had, because while those could happen in a pathway, the impact might be much smaller than if there was opportunities for larger discussion and community involvement.
That was actually something we discussed at our subcommittee, that we can educate our young people, which we have some very talented, bright young individuals joining the call tonight, but the roots are where we need to get to. And I say the roots is family members. It could be parents, it could be grandparents, it could be cousins. And so as we develop this, we need to be able to create, and we'll talk about that a little bit more detail from our plan, is we need, everything we put together needs to be able to push out to the family members, because the young people can't be the only ones accountable for this activity of change. It has to be able to go back to the home, and that home support needs to be behind them as they try and change things.
This is Brennan.
So I like that topic, and I was just thinking about how a couple of years ago we obviously not in COVID times, but it was put on by another part of the state, but it was basically a get to know your neighbor dinner. And then there were topic discussions provided to each table. And the idea was that you just sat with random strangers at a table and talked about things that were important to our community. I'm thinking maybe, obviously, probably in a more virtual experience, but maybe putting together something like that for the community. So we are bringing in the community to have some of these more difficult conversations.
Thank you. Joe, did you just raise your hand?
No, it was me, Maya.
I was just agreeing.
So I would add to this, and Jane is our kind of curriculum expert on the call this evening, at least, Charaho's committee. Let's get that out there. She's a curriculum expert across the board, but certainly one on Charaho's curriculum. I would encourage that subcommittee to think broadly too about where current events, right, should be inserted around issues of diversity, inclusion, and equity. When I heard Mr. Off speak about the health careers and talked about being embedded, well, that's good, right? That's actually moving in the right direction, because we don't want a unit on ethnicity, a unit on religion, a unit on being a cultural difference. It needs to be threaded, because we don't teach a unit on being white and all the privilege that comes with that, right? It's just there all the time. So it needs to be similar for our issues of, for our BIPOC community. So areas like critical thinking, right? And Jane might be the person to tap into to see where is critical thinking taught in the curriculum. And then in there, how can we put in issues like a current event? Maybe it's defund the police, maybe it's something else that pertains to the BIPOC needs of the community, and teach critical thinking, the standard, using that. And then civics, similarly, right? There may be spaces where it can spiral through, and that actually is the anti-racist practice, because then it's not, today we talk about anti-racism, okay, turn the page. It's just something that we do with a constant, with some constant pressure. So I'd have the subcommittee reach out perhaps to Jane, and I know Jerry's taking notes too, about that's another approach to making the curriculum more anti-racist, is to take current events and not have it as a standalone, but almost have it, and it's the admin, right? Leaders in our schools have to say, this is my expectation. This is now part of the expectation of our excellence, is to get better at this. And the school committee may need to be right there supporting the admin, saying, okay, what do you need? Whether it's in funding for trainings, or how, as Joe mentioned, it's uncomfortable for adults too, right? To talk about this. And so it might have to come from different places, but Dan, to that current events piece, that's the way we keep it long after this one issue goes and the next one comes, is that we make that the prompts, the essays, the test items, when you get into the meat of the lesson, it has to come from an issue, right, from current events that affects BIPOC communities.
I think that captures it really well. And I think from a curriculum standpoint, like you just said, Lisa, but I also think for our practices and our policy work group to think about that as well, of, what is the practice of the school district during, current events like this? What is that communication look like? Who is, is that simply on the shoulders of our superintendent? Is that beyond that? Who's involved in crafting those thoughts, things like that? So I think that's really helpful, I think, at a subcommittee level, for us to look at how current events intersect with practices, with policy, with curriculum.
I think that's great. And Sabrina said something really critical. She said many critical things. But when she talked about it, the conversations are coming from the students, that's okay. But we cannot have our very few students of color be the educators or be the ones to have to bring it up. That we can't have that either, right? So I like what you're saying, Dan. We have to make sure that that's the practices piece, right? That it has to be coming from the leaders of the community and not waiting for the students to say, we'd like to talk about this.
Go ahead, Sabrina.
So I see Mrs. Laub on the call, and I just wanted to say that, so she teaches my English class, my 12 honors English, and she has been the best teacher I've ever had that incorporates current events into the class and really takes it to a different level in terms of like how your education, like just that like math, English, science type thing really relates to current events. So go Miss Laub.
I'd like to, I don't know if those
Yeah.
are hand claps. Lisa, is that a hand clap or Katie, is that a hand? Oh, okay.
I actually,
I
was
wanted
clapping.
to ask Miss Laub, how, with what she said to you, about you, how is it that you incorporate that so effortlessly as it would appear that she
well, I
said?
wouldn't say it's effortless. Nothing we teachers do is effortlessly. You know that. I was going to ask Mr. Grant, actually. I had a guest artist come in to my 11th grade class, and we went through literature, and we talked about issues of race. And there was a student there who took another perspective, and Mr. Johnson wanted to have a discussion with a police officer. So I was wondering, Mr. Grant, if you could put me in touch with the officer that you said might be willing to come into a class and have a discussion like that with a Black man about defunding, about experiences with the police, with criminal justice, with law enforcement, with we could go from there.
Sure, sure, and I'll reach out to him.
Yeah.
I have several friends in law enforcement, and so I'll reach out to them and see how they feel about it. I don't want to, out them right now because I know,
No,
like I said, it's difficult. Like Joe was saying, it's really difficult for for adults. And this
Very
friend of
difficult.
mine had some of his closest friends on the force believe very different things from him. And so even in day-to-day, force activity, it's something, but I think he probably would be fine with coming in, and I'll broach the subject, and I'll put you in contact with him if he's comfortable with it.
And again, we have law enforcement. One that I think at the top of my head is Sergeant Wesley Pennington with the state police, who has come up through our state police during a time of challenge. So he can share some really interesting aspects. And he was interviewed a week after the challenge that we had last year on a show called Wine with Dave. And it was a whole week of conversations on racism. And he was interviewed for part of that. And it was a very, very interesting conversation to listen to. So
I'll reach out to get that information. Thank you.
okay.
Dan, other than this particular issue of obviously of current event, were there other ones that you wanted to touch on, or you were just wanted this discussion to begin?
I think the thought came most into, I think the formation of this anti-racism task force was partially in response to current events. So I think at the kind of crux of what we're doing, that's been integrated. But it was just really, it felt very obvious and almost uncomfortable having a meeting that same day and not being able to talk about it at all and how it intersected with our work. So that made me think of, do we have a standing item where we discuss current event, and I don't know if that, I know we, obviously we're almost at the halfway point in our agenda. We have usually a lot to talk about, and our work still continues, but that was just kind of the start there. But I do think, even if it's not to that level, I think from even I think what Joe mentioned with stuff happening in other municipalities around our community, to the even current events as it pertains to the school climate within, with the work I do with the Chariho Youth Task Force, we have our ambassador meetings almost weekly, and we hear from the student perspective, from students of color, or students in general who have different experiences within that classroom. So having a forum to talk about whether that current event is at a classroom or district level, or whether that's at a state or national level, just some place, some forum for us to discuss that. And it's very possible we may not have something to discuss every single month, but having that format, that platform that would allow, whether that be us as members of the task force or members of the community, to talk about.
I'm glad that you asked for that, because I myself feel as though when we speak about curriculum and I'm in school, or if I can think back that far, everything that we talked about was history. We didn't talk about anything that was going on at the time. And it, whenever you think about, the young folks are thinking, learning, working, and educating today. So a lot of times they think it's very irrelevant. I mean, we do know that we have to learn from our past, but we happen to be living in a time right now where we need to learn from our current events. So I think it's very relevant, and I'm glad that you asked for that to be a part of it.
Dan, I'm just disappointed you didn't sing that.
Y'all miss a really great meeting at the policy subcommittee. Just saying, we have a musical number each time from the Joe Reddish, so it's a good time. Just wait for our report out.
Thank you very much. Oh, Dartula, I see your hand up.
Would this be a good time to make a motion to have a standing item in the agenda to acknowledge current events? So that way, if there is something that is important to discuss in relation to the lens that we are looking at our school system, we have the opportunity to do so if it's happening in live time. Or is this not the time?
I would second that.
Okay, so for recording purposes, you would like to make a motion to include on a regular basis a current events discussion so that we remain relevant. Is that correct? Am I hearing that right?
I think my word choice might be acknowledgement. I want to be careful because I know that topics like that can become a larger discussion and have many more pockets to open. So I would say acknowledgement because it can lend itself to a discussion if needed. It could also lend itself to acknowledging what's going on specifically because we do have members of the task force who may be deeply affected by it, and providing this acknowledgement at least gives an opportunity to have a small discussion, a recognition of what's happening. So yes, I would say acknowledgement.
Okay, so your motion is to put in place an acknowledgement at the meetings of current events.
Yes.
And that was seconded by Joe.
Correct.
And now we'll vote on that. All of those in favor? And are any opposed? Any abstentions? I see that as being passed unanimously for, I want to say it right, please help me out, Dartula, to have on the agenda an acknowledgement of the current events at our meetings.
Yes, a standing acknowledgement of current events at our meetings.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Now, next on our agenda is going to be the discussion on the structure of the task force report to the school committee. Obvious selection to begin that would be Lisa.
It's not actually my item, Chair.
Oh, I'm sorry. Whose item is that? I apologize.
Let me know that you are coming up with a new structure.
I believe the thought behind that, and it's very possible I'm wrong, but I believe that was kind of a follow-up to our last meeting. We talked a lot at our last meeting about, what comes next. Obviously, we are, we're getting towards the end of the school year. We, as a task force, were created to provide recommendation to the school committee. We talked about what that format of the recommendations would be at the end of the year, but at the end of our meeting last time, we talked about the idea of providing like a progress report to the school committee, so that it's not just a, hi, you created us and we didn't talk to you for an entire year, and now here is a multi-page recommendation. So I think it was just to be a quick conversation about when should we, and I'm guessing we would make that request to Lisa about, could you, when can we be put onto an agenda, in what format, i.e. how many people from this committee, is it, by subcommittee, or is it a general update holistically? So I think it was just a conversation about that.
So I know in our meeting that we discussed 3 levels, and you can tell us if these make sense. Tier 1 are things that we can get done immediately. So they're the what we call the low hanging fruit. Tier 2 are those things that take a little bit more effort, and tier 3 is things that really are going to have to engage, over probably a year's implementation. But we want to have a plan, whether it's curriculum change and in the process of things. I mean, so we, as our team can give an example, because we've kind of put everything in a tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 format already, if you'd like us to do that.
Well, I can tell you that format, I think across the 3 subcommittees makes a lot of sense for the school committee to process. I think that a progress report should be forthcoming. And the way it would work is I would gladly contact the chair and get it on an upcoming agenda when you're ready. Let me know, look at the projected dates. Sometimes the superintendent has to mush it because she might have a lot to put on a particular agenda, but I would help with all that. And there's 2 ways that it could happen. So one would be you would present your report, perhaps your tiered recommendations, and you might want to do it like one subcommittee at a time, right? Let the school committee absorb, right? It's going to be a lot for everybody. And then either, right, a school committee member would then pick up an item at the end of the meeting, right, and say, oh, I'd like to request such and such from the Anti-Racism Task Force recommendation to be on a future agenda, which would then allow for a full conversation with the public and a discussion and potentially motions and changes. Another way would be you could submit a specific recommendation and motion. And if I put that on, then the public would be aware that there was going to be possible change to a curriculum policy or practice, and it could happen in that meeting, right? And so just kind of giving you format, those are kind of like the 2 pillars, the 2 tiers or the avenues that you could take. My recommendation would be definitely take the tiered approach, and probably start presenting one committee at a time. And I think it's time to probably give an update.
That's really helpful. I don't know if anybody has any other thoughts about, do we want to set that? And we may know more after we do our subcommittee report outs, but obviously it is February, so, and there's only, is there I guess before I even finish that question, do we have a end date of this task force, or were we created and we can just keep moving forward?
Yes to the latter, but best practice would be there should be like a mid-year, end-year update. Okay. And I think good practice would be at the end of the year, if there's still more work to do, which there will be, right, then I might kind of try to formalize that by a renewal of, right, for the upcoming academic school year, just to kind of keep things fresh and tight. But yes, there's no end date.
Okay, that's helpful.
And I think we discussed last time, right now, the school board's going to be focused on budget for the next couple of months until the budget. So I think we talked about looking at May, June timeframe.
So I'm going to say that's too late to start making recommendations. Yes, we have the budget, but keep in mind the school committee has several budget workshops. So we do not only talk about the the budget, we have our school committee meetings, which actually deals with the entire district's issue oversight. And we have lots of budget workshops on Tuesdays and Thursdays and all kinds of other days. So please don't feel that that you can't add anything. And in fact, right, it would be nice to not talk about the budget the entire school committee meeting, but the superintendent has the entire oversight of the district to manage. So again, even if one committee is ready to give a progress report, I think March would be a good time.
And how would we requisition to give that report? Like we have to say what our agenda meetings are going to be before a certain time frame before our meeting. So how soon would we need to ask for that subcommittee to be able to give a progress report?
2 weeks would be probably best to give our clerk time to post and get it into the agenda. And if you know even before then, and Maya, you can contact Gina, because again, she's going to know how much admin she's putting on the agenda for the school.
Right. Okay.
Make motions and decide on. So as soon as you know, you should let her know.
When's the next school board meeting in March, or when are they?
March 9th and March 23rd. March 9th is the budget adoption, and I haven't had the previous history, so Lisa, you may know if that's a really big one, or which one is, because in April, we have only one in April because of the all-day referendum.
By the adoption, we may make minor changes, but we have the big public one before then, where we have to have a quorum of 25 from each city, town.
And Lisa, that's not a regular meeting, correct? That I don't have that listed as a regular. That just says public hearing on budget specifically.
An additional meeting. Yeah. So the adoption might just be a tweak. It's usually not major changes.
Hi, Katie. I did see your hand raised.
I was just going to say, is it my understanding that it was proposed that we should then present at 3 different meetings? So we should start soon. So one committee could present at a time.
Correct.
I did recommend that, and you don't have to follow it. I've served on this committee for 6 years. I've got a sense of what might work better. So I would say, because curriculum is, right? And then policy and practice, it's a lot to get 11 other people besides me to absorb, understand, question. They're going to have questions on the research you did. Who did you speak to, right? What angle are you coming from? Have you considered this? Have you considered that, right? It will be a robust discussion. So I don't think that anyone really could do all 3 in a meeting.
So I understood that it was March 9th, the 23rd. There's one in April.
April 13th, Katie.
April 13th. I didn't know if those might be possible, or even bumping it down, one level of meetings potentially, and then prioritizing which subcommittee we think might be ready first, or which one makes logical sense first. I don't know.
So I think that doesn't only make sense, Katie, but I think it also then gives you time to get the read and the feedback from the school committee, right? Because you're going to get a better understanding of what items the committee is looking towards taking up to create motions around, and what might need retooling. And the school committee very well may say to you, okay, I see what you're saying, but we'd like to know more about this aspect and come back to us. So you're going to give yourself more time by getting started.
So this would just be an update basically to say, here's what our plan is, essentially, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Unless a particular committee does have something finite, like you, Joe, you talked about low-hanging fruit. If
Right.
you have something that you're ready for, then you could say that, like, at this point, we're ready to make we're, seeking, you to further explore and make a motion on this. And here are some other things that we're going to come back to you with at the end of the year. It can look different for each subcommittee.
So I'll ask our policy committee if we want to take the March 23rd to kick it off.
Is all of your policy committee here?
Yes, we are.
Oh, yep.
Was the first meeting we were thinking of March 9th or the 23rd? I think either, and again, not to speak for the whole committee, but I think we're probably very close to being able to provide at least a progress report.
Yep, 9/23 for March, and then April 13th.
So it looks like the policy committee seems to be all in agreement for which date, the 9th or and Donis?
Yeah, I would feel confident with the 9th for the policy committee if the rest of the group agrees.
Works
for me.
I think the 9th is great.
I was very weak, Dartula. Come on. I think the 9th works good. Come on.
Only because I'm thinking that we might be able to also speak again on the 23rd, but I didn't want to say it.
I believe what we just went over, which was a very nice method, was to allow them to absorb what you give them first.
Right.
And there are other committees that eventually
Put us on
would
every
like
meeting.
Every meeting. Just kidding. Just kidding. The 9th is great.
Gina, I'm thinking if we phrase it on anti-racism task force, policy subcommittee, progress report and recommendations, even if they don't have a recommendation, we're covered, right? We're over covered. And if they do, right, we're okay too. So it allows them to both give a progress report, kind of speak openly about the work that they have done and are looking to still do. And then if a motion is to be made, the recommendation piece should cover that. Does that feel okay to you?
Yep, that sounds good.
Does it make sense for practices to be on the 23rd then, and curriculum perhaps on April 13th?
I like that.
And we'll word it the same exact way.
That I would say the word is the same. So I see that policy is going to submit their report to the school committee for March 9th. Practices chose the 23rd and curriculum for April 13th. I like it. We were ready for that. And this is also a perfect lead into our next agenda item, which is the school committee liaison report.
Okay, so similar to Dartula's motion about being able to speak to something that may have come up in between the meeting and doesn't make agenda item, the report item is a way of doing that. So thank you to all of you, and thank you, Chair, for adding that to the agenda. Two items that I was wanting to bring to everyone's attention for this meeting. One is one of our we all do outstanding work in this area, but if you're not aware of Joe's award, I wanted to report out that he was given a Community Service Award at the annual Rhode Island Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. celebration. And just acknowledge that and thank you not only for doing that, but then spending this time with us and all that you're doing for our school committee. We thank you. And congratulations.
Thank you.
The other item was I wanted to bring to your attention the high school's diversity book club. So for those of you who haven't seen you're not following me on Twitter, some really amazing things are happening with that diversity book club. And actually Nicole Weeks was going to attend this evening, and I don't see her on the call, but it's essentially advised by Nicole Weeks, Cheryl Lightfritz, and Rebecca Peabody. And I had the opportunity, because it was on my Bluetooth, to listen into the book club the other day as I was transporting 2 of its members from one place to another. And they're reading The Hate You Give by Angie Thomas, and the level of the scaffolding that these teachers are offering and the questions and the prompts are exactly what we want to see and everything we've talked about this evening. And they're doing it around this, a piece of literature. And it was just so well done. And it's really not well attended, right? There's maybe 6 students that have joined. And it seems as if part of the issue is that there's just not an awareness that it exists. And students can both attend on Zoom or in person. So I want to make sure that this committee was aware that it meets on Tuesdays at 2:30. If students that want to go in person, it would be G5, but students are welcome to join on Zoom. It definitely focuses on some pretty meaningful dialogue, and it's actually diversely attended as well. So I think a few of our BIPOC students have found their way there, but they definitely want more students. The next book they're reading is The Absolutely True Diary of a Part-Time Indian by Sherman Alexie. The students can join in at any time. And then the other piece I just wanted to share, and this is the part that just, I was hoping to get Angie Thomas's attention, but it didn't work. One of the teachers actually partnered with a local bookstore and purchased with her own funds a signed copy of The Concrete Rose for all of the students in this book club, and then also made arrangements for them to have a link to an evening session with Angie Thomas, a live book talk with the author, which most of them attended. So these teachers are doing some really great work, and they're doing it after school. So I knew that this committee would want to know that, and I can't email all of you to tell you this stuff because we'd be breaking our OMA. So that's why this report item is going to be a standing thing here. Anything else I need you to know about that? Just to promote it if you can. Oh, and I have mentioned this. So this, I did speak to Mrs. Weeks and to talk about through which structures internally funding could be requested. I remember in Donis from the beginning, right, when we first talked about this committee at the school committee, the very first day, she said, yeah, this is all fine and well, put the money. The resources tell us you care. The resources tell us that you're committed. So I carried on that message to Mrs. Weeks and it's great that you did this, but I'm sure there's money to buy these kids books. We're Charahoe. Have you seen our budget? There's money to buy them books. So I encouraged her to find those channels and ask those questions. But if necessary, come to this committee and say, could you please include as part of your curriculum motion funding if that's necessary? And I know Gina is helping out a little bit with that, and Craig McKenzie, I think, has jumped on board, and someone told me Katie writes grants like in her sleep. But I wanted you to be aware of that too. Like there's an exact place where we might say, okay, let's get these kids books. Like they're going to show up. But again, thank you to those teachers for all that they're doing after school on their own to get this started, and open arms to any student that wants to join.
Just a reminder, there's grants through community2000.org that could fund some of that. So I know Gina knows how to get to that, and a couple of other teachers know how to get to that. So
Actually, yeah, they're going to be opening back up because their next one closes in May. But I do think that it was untapped. I think that with all the overwhelming with the pandemic, it was untapped a little bit. Then, teachers we have to we remind them a lot, but they see a lot of information.
I'm actually a part of the diversity book club, and I think it's great that you brought it up. I'm pretty sure that it's open to community members because there are some people who usually attend that are not students. So if anyone would be interested in attending themselves, like of course we'd love to have you. And I think like going back to what we were saying about current events, it's a really great space to talk about that for students like myself. Like I'm not in criminal justice, I'm not in a CTC class. So it's like a great outlet to have those discussions that are so really important for all students. So it's a great like program that those two teachers started, and they're doing a great job running it.
Autumn, thank you so much for coming. So my daughter's Bella in break. Can you give the Anti-Racism Task Force an example of one of the questions or topics that I think you had a meeting yesterday? So either yesterday or the week before, just help them to understand what the conversations are like. We've been hearing all night, we include diversity, we include this, but it's been very broad. Can you tell us something specific, a really meaningful conversation that maybe got hard that came out of this book club?
So I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with the book, The Hate You Give. It's about a girl who witnessed her cousin shot by police, like it's a case of police brutality. And so we've had a lot of different discussions. I think most of them are from like a set list of questions like that. I think Angie Thomas, the author of the book, might have written, but those questions lead to a lot of great conversations. So we've talked about like how the character's name is Star, so how her community reacts to the case of police brutality and how the murder like affected the students at school. And that led to like us talking about how us and like our students felt after the murder of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, and like how that impacted our own community, especially, and like how we talked about the differences between us being a predominantly white school and community and how we reacted to that compared to in the book how they reacted when it was a more like a diverse community. We've had discussions about like just the police and like the police in schools and how we feel about that, because that's another topic that the book talks about. And we do have police officers at our school, so we've talked about like how that affects us, and just like lots of really great conversations about different types of things like that.
Katie.
Just going off of this diversity book club idea, I'm not sure if anyone's aware, but there's a big read every year, and one of Harjo's books is on the big read this year, An American Sunrise. There is a grant that could be pursued, but it was quite a heavy lift and not enough time or resources to pursue it. But it's things such as that I wonder if there could be a community, like a community read or some way of engaging the community. I ordered it and read it, and I think it could lead to some really powerful conversations.
Oh, Ms. Laub, I see your hand.
Just wanted to mention, to piggyback on that, the Read Across Rhode Island novel this year is stamped. And I will be teaching that in the spring as part of the literature curriculum for 11th grade, which studies American literature. And it's in that, for that study that I'll have my guest artist back, in fact, hopefully, and we'll have him be a part of those discussions, which were really helpful. When we read Huckleberry Finn, when we read Baldwin, when we read Coates, it was good to have his voice and his perspective as we discussed it from a literary point of view. And just wanted to also say that I'm doing that in collaboration with our librarian at the high school, middle school. So that's a great collaboration also across the state, stamped in the spring.
Thank you. Thank you, Autumn. I don't know if you can still hear me, but Autumn and Sabrina, thank you guys so much for all the input that you've provided. Miss Lisa, was that all that you had with
That's it
with your?
for this one.
Okay, excellent. So we have on our agenda next our subcommittee reports. Does any one of the subcommittees volunteer to go first? I say policy, since you're going to be first on the school committee.
I think that sounds good. I'm happy to read off some of the notes unless anybody wants to take the lead.
Do you want me to just do a high level?
Sure, go for it.
Okay. So as I shared, we had a great meeting this last week, and we broke things into 3 tiers. I'll just keep it simple because you're getting a full report, next month from us. But in our tier 1, those are the low-hanging fruit items, which is create a diversity statement, which is basically trying to incorporate something in the school handbook that really identifies what the focus of the district policies are, and then creating some type of physical visual type of indication. So when a student walks into the school, they maybe see a word cloud that really encompasses all the thoughts of what's the values of, and then it leads up to one big word, which is inclusion or whatever that word happens to be. And then possibly down the road in the announcements during the day that there's a reading of what the mission is of the school. So it's always ingrained in part of the process. Craft a discrimination policy, something that's relevant and inclusive of everybody, so that there's a mindset up front for everybody, but also that policy needs to go out to the parents and it needs to be documented somehow by an electronic signature or something that says, we read it, we understand it. Again, creating accountabilities, not just for the students who are very important, but it needs to be an accountability to the parents and the community. Tier 2 is that next level. We're climbing up in the trees a little bit. Overhaul the Char Hill School Handbook through kind of an anti-racism lens. Some of the ideas that came out of that is create a flow chart that's easy to follow on how do we respond to an issue or a challenge that comes up, because quite often that is the problem. It gets to this person and maybe one teacher's really good at it, another teacher's like, oh, I don't know what to do, but it creates a process that we know can be followed easily. Onboarding orientation for staff, students, caregivers, with emphasis on anti-racism efforts. And that is really, again, can't just train our kids. We need to get something that's out to the parents, the community, and so everybody's singing from the same hymn book. And then now we get up into the trees where it's hard to reach sometimes, and that is really to create a policy mandating ongoing professional development related to diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice. So evaluate what's currently there, but we don't want this just to be, hey, I've got a day of training. We want this to be a day that's an experience. And so some of those experiences may be that we get the teachers off-site and they go and do the training at the Institute of can't even think, I lost my thought on that.
Nonviolence.
Thank you, Institute of Nonviolence, or they go do the training at the Met School. So they're in an environment that looks like what we need to be engaging in, but gets them away from the normal environment of the school district. And then look at external trainers, who can we get in as guest speakers? It's great to have, our normal people doing the training, but if you get people who are relevant to what you're talking about when it comes to this type of training, is, whether we have maybe it's Sergeant Wesley, Pennington, that's, an officer of color. Maybe it's a female officer who's Hispanic up in Providence Police Department. Maybe it's an individual who's been marginalized, so that, the teachers really can hear what, if we don't fix it now, what it's going to look like potentially for one of our students down the road from somebody who has been marginalized. So that's the kind of the quick, and then using programs like Restore More and other things like that, and creating some comfort zones within the school system. So that's kind of a quick, rundown.
Thank you, Joe. Does the rest of the policy committee have anything else to add to? How about practices? Who's going to be? Oh, I'm sorry, Jess.
Sorry, I just have a little aside. There's, I don't know if anybody's heard of him, but there's a guy, Marco McWilliams, who just was awarded the role of, I think, assistant director at the Center for Reconciliation in Providence. And he actually right now is putting on like a whole month of Black history, essentially like lessons and talks and things. I think it's all free. So if you look him up on social media, he's an amazing person, and he's a friend of mine. And I also encourage you, like, if you do participate in it, I've been trying to encourage people to recognize him materially, even though it's free. So I have his Cash App information if you want to, take advantage of his great programming. So just a little side note.
Awesome.
Thank you. Who is going to speak on practices subcommittee behalf?
I would be happy to kick us off, and others feel free to jump in. So I believe some of this we started to share out last time. The initial kind of format is in a couple different categories. So we're talking about hiring practices, discipline practices, equitable guidance practices for all students, practices regarding, things like different happenings within the school, things like standing for the pledge, external review of curriculum. So not looking at us, working on curriculum. Obviously, that's a different subcommittee, but what is the practices around the external review of that? And then also around having the practices of having a paid Indigenous liaison to the school district. So to start off, just kind of a little more in depth there, some of the recommendations we're working on crafting right now around hiring practices. We've looked at some of the data to better understand, from a perspective of how many educators, how many staff, how many coaches identify as a person of color within our school district, and looking at the difference between what's written on the page as our hiring policy versus what's happening as our hiring practice. So how could we work more intentionally and actively to recruit a more diverse, applicant to be an educator or staff coach administration within our school district. So we highlight some of the recommendations and steps that we think would need to make that happen. We also talk a little bit about discipline, better understanding, based on feedback from students, being able to, how is, bullying or discrimination, how are those things being, how are those things being documented, and how are those things being handled kind of from start to finish? So better understanding what that looks like. And from a guidance perspective, we talked about kind of the differences, even some of us on the committee versus some of the students we've talked with, different experiences they've had through a guidance lens. So ensuring that all of the professionals that we have in our guidance department, ensuring that they're well versed in things from Native American universities or historically Black colleges and universities, women colleges, things outside of higher education, things in that, and we detail out some kind of steps from there. So a lot more information, that's kind of a higher level. So I don't know if Carla or Thon or Katie, if anybody has anything else to add.
Yeah, I'm happy to share. We haven't yet organized it by tier 1, 2, and 3, but we kind of had those ideas. what we have done is looked at a common template that we might organize each of our recommendations under. So we give a bit of background, and then at the actual recommendation, we've been working through what a potential goal could look like. So in several years' time, what would we expect if this was implemented? We've been brainstorming ideas as to how to implement change, as well as how, I guess maybe this is related to tier level, because we have a readiness to implement, like how easy is this going to be to accomplish? So that kind of connects with the tiers, readiness and feasibility to implement, as well as when and how would we start seeing change in our estimation if we were to see these recommendations followed through.
I actually love the idea of the uniformity with the subcommittees, especially because I think it'll be easier for it to be presented to the school committee and understood if it was uniform. That's just my little.
I'm happy to share. It seems like everyone might, every group. I know there's cross-pollination with somebody being on 2 of all of them, so it seems like somehow we're all covered. But I'm happy to share those categories as we kind of work through them if it makes sense and is helpful to come up with some commonality so it looks similar as it's reviewed by school committee.
I actually like that idea. Curriculum. Who would like to speak on their behalf? Is that you, Adonis?
Yeah, that's
Okay.
me. My computer is telling me my internet is unstable. Can you guys hear me?
Yes. Sometimes if you turn your video off, it helps.
Let me do that. So if I fade away, someone else
text you.
on the curriculum committee can take our notes and relay them to the group. But I will do my best with this scary connection. Okay, so we also subscribed to the tier model. And so for our tier 1 items for the curriculum subcommittee, we talked about creating a statement tied to the mission and vision of Charahoe that really plainly describes the intent to utilize curriculum to better the education of all students, and to understand that we are taking a anti-racism decolonization lens in our approach to curriculum broadly. So that was our tier 1, is kind of speaking those words out in that intention. Tier 2 was to look at a gap assessment between the curriculum as it stands. There are strengths there already. There are places that are really solid, and there are places that require immediate attention. There are places that need different levels of intervention. So we want to assess that and kind of get an understanding of the lay of the land before we kind of jump in with 2 feet. So that gap assessment would be something that involves kind of BIPOC people in developing the evaluation to begin with. One of the shortcomings of most data that we see. Oh yay, there's Harris family background noise. So some of the evaluations that we see as BIPOC people and educators is that they aren't asking questions that are important to our communities. So developing an evaluation tool
Screenshot it.
that includes BIPOC people. Hey, oh, there he goes. Okay, I was about to tell him to. So I think we want the evaluation and gap assessment to include BIPOC populations and to ask the questions that are important to them. Also including students, right? So we have this kind of triangulation that happens where we're all looking at one thing from different perspectives. So we want to make sure that in that gap assessment, we include students like those who are attending this evening and those who are involved in these different facets of asking questions around equity. We want to make sure they're a part of that gap assessment tool and process. So that's tier 2. Tier 3, which are our biggies, is to create some kind of, we don't have a word for it, but this is going to fall short, but it sounds so like bureaucratic and like resource center. So a place that has resources that teachers can access and utilize immediately and incorporate into their curriculum as it stands right now. Teachers are under an incredible amount of pressure and they're required to do things that they've never done before with a quick turnaround. And so we want to make sure that we have a space that they can go to utilize curriculum resources that exist already in different spaces that they can use immediately. And that resource center is for all teachers. It's not just ELA teachers. We're talking about understanding the importance of TEK, traditional ecological knowledge in STEM, and looking at the importance of representation, even in the way that we talk about physical health and decolonizing physical health. Physical health being something that's tied to our mental health, and our mental health being something that's tied to the performance in our academics. And so if we take that kind of approach in this resource center and say, this is not just for the ELA teachers, these are not just for the history teachers or the social studies teachers. This, if you are an educator, there is a space, there is a resource here for you. So we want to kind of work into creating that center, which may exist kind of in the virtual space and hopefully someday, maybe even a physical space. And also create mechanisms for interaction with that resource center that is community focused. So the policy group already talked about the importance of, you can't just kind of siphon off the kids and say, okay, we've talked about equity with the kids, done and done. We really want to make sure that we bring along parents, grandparents, cousins, aunts, uncles, the community, and have opportunities for them to ask questions about the resource center, have them opportunities to interact with the curriculum resources and make that kind of a living thing as opposed to a list of websites that teachers can go to. And then the other kind of big thing in tier 3, so we have 2 things, is that we're going to look at a Charahoe specific curriculum that centers decolonization and anti-racism, that is scaffolded, that begins in pre-K. It begins in pre-K with providing resources that show adequate representation of Indigenous people and people of color, LGBTQ people, and that those resources and that visibility is made clear as young as pre-K. And we build on it kindergarten through graduation, so that we have, by the time we have our students coming into high school, they're engaged with civics and concepts of tribal sovereignty. They understand nation to nationhood. They understand the importance of treaties, and the United States government was based on these promises that were made to Native people and communities and the rights therein. And so we kind of build and build year after year. And that is something that is also a reflection of South County here. So we're looking at really localized histories. We're looking at localized historical figures, contemporary figures. I'm looking at this through an Indigenous lens because that happens to be my forte, but we have cases that are pending right now that determine tribal sovereignty for tribes across the country that originated here in Rhode Island. And so I think that is a localized example, but there are literally hundreds of these, and we want to bring those stories into the classrooms through something that is specific and unique unto Charahoe. And that's the biggie. That's the big mama of all of this. Of course, that decolonization curriculum and anti-racism curriculum would include ongoing performance expectations and metrics for understanding what our progress is, where we're lacking, et cetera. Just a quick note for us in our conversation that we had in the curriculum group. We also recognize that our timelines in the process of decolonization, if we're going to use that term, are long-term timelines. So we are going to be making investments in things that maybe those of us on this Zoom call will not see come to fruition. But that doesn't mean we don't do it, right? Someone 40 years ago could have done this work, and we could have had a Narragansett superintendent, principals, school committee members that are robust and that vocalize the needs of the Indigenous community here. But that did not happen. The systems were in place that did not allow for that to happen. And so now we have this spotlight, we have this opportunity, and we want to make sure that we capitalize on that and put in place the structures that make that possible for our great-great-grandchildren. So we want to make note of that timeline. It's a little bit different than 1 year from now, 2 years from now, but it's an important part of understanding the tiers that we set up.
And Donna, is that written down, or did you just say that off the top of your head?
Well, no, I did not say that off the top of my head. I mean,
Okay.
that is something that we had talked about in our committee. That was the genius of my subcommittee. The curriculum committee talked about that.
There was ad lib in there. That's what she's asking. There was ad lib.
I'm glad that we're recording this because I want the school committee to hear what you just said. Right? We are there for 4-year terms, and some people will roll over. Somebody can carry that on term to like go back to this recording. That was exactly what needs to be told. Well, really well done.
I'm so sorry to interrupt, but I have to leave the Zoom. It was so great to listen to this conversation, and I'll definitely be back next time. Have a great night, everyone.
Thanks, Autumn.
I have to say thank you also, Adonis. Something that she just said is so powerful. Many things that you just said is so powerful. But when we understand what our history is that we're currently making, that we are involved in right now, and it doesn't just empower us. Like what you said about land settlement agreements. I mean, it's big. That started here, and it affects the entire country. Now, that doesn't just empower our Native community, it empowers our South County community, because that just shows that how important that we are. You know, we're not just the pretty little beach community, that we have big things that impact the entire country, and that's empowering to our students. And I'm glad that you did mention that, because obviously that's not common knowledge either. Thank you, subcommittees. Next on our agenda is requesting future agenda items. Oh, I'm sorry, Anna. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
It's okay. I was just thinking of what Sabrina and Autumn were talking about earlier with the discussions that they're having in criminal justice and the book club. And like when I was having them in my classes, and they were more in classes that were smaller sized and more elective based. And so I was thinking with the curriculum group, when you were saying like tier 2 and tier 3, when you're analyzing what's happening in the classes, was to have something to put into the classes where students had small group facilitated discussions about these topics, so that they could speak freely and feel that they were supported to speak what they wanted to say, but that all students were having the chance, and it wasn't just a conversation that happened by chance, but it was meant to, like, it was written into the curriculum.
That is so important. Absolutely. Thank you. Caleb, is your hand up? Go ahead, Mr. Grant.
Thank you. I'm sure there are much greater resources out there as well, but just in terms of talking about the roots of tribal sovereignty and that whole, I don't want to waste a bunch of time getting my it's such a notch that I don't want to release the floodgates, but there's a book, God, War, and Providence by James Warren, and it's all about the initial Roger Wheeler work with the Narragansett Confederation, and I haven't fact checked some of it, but it seems to be a pretty condensed version of the initial agreements for sovereignty that were established that then were nullified, and the backdoor dealings and Boston Federation and Puritans and all that stuff. If in terms of just resources for teachers in these group discussions, it's a pretty easy read, and it does lay some of the groundwork for just all of this. Like you're saying, it's like the whole country. This was a very strong nation here, like where we're sitting having this Zoom, and so I digress, but because that's a whole, I could go on and on, but I know there's probably much better resources out there, but just to throw that one out there for people if they're doing classes.
Thank you very much. And not was here, is here. I just have to say that. Is still here. Wow. I know it's getting late, so we have already moved to requesting what our future agenda items are going to be. That's where we are on our current agenda. Do we have any requests, Ms. Fee?
I got a request from Mark Gardner, who's on the Social Studies Committee. He would like to address this group. I'm not entirely sure in what capacity, but he wanted to share something that's happening at the state level regarding the Social Studies history curriculum. I know nothing other than that, but he asked if he could be put on the agenda for 5 minutes for the next meeting. That's all I know.
Oh, that's more than we knew.
I would also suggest that we invite, I guess there's a group called Interact at the high school. Is that correct? That we invite them to join our meeting and kind of share what they do, because they're a group that's focused on diversity, and their input would be, I think, valuable to us.
Heidi, can you repeat the name of that teacher?
Mark Gardner.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Sabrina, I did see your hand raised, but if I could go ahead and get all of the committee members' suggestions, then I'm going to go right to you. Don't want you to think I don't see you over there.
One thing, I'm not sure if this is an agenda item, but a community member brought it up to me. They had asked if anything was happening with the anti-racism task force, and obviously, I let them know that there are lots going on. The reason they had asked the question is if you look up Charahoe Anti-Racism Task Force, there is a part on the website, but it's just like a sentence and it says join us, but there's nothing else housed there. So I'm wondering I don't know if we need to talk about that as a community of like, is there anything else that can be more public facing? Whether that's who's on the committee or like even just a place to house all in one place where the agenda or the minutes could go or something, but just something easier just to continue to make sure it's really accessible to folks. But I'm not sure if that makes sense as an agenda item or what format that would be.
Yeah, so Dan, I'm gonna just make a recommendation. It probably doesn't need to be a full agenda item, because my guess is that there'd be a consensus that everyone would support any web development on the task force. So I might reach out to Gina directly.
Okay.
Because it's really going to end up being a conversation around like IT and can they take on at this time the human bandwidth to maybe build some more web content out, or but I mean certainly it's your committee, but it probably doesn't need to wait for a discussion. You can probably just see if Gina can allocate some time to Sean Cole and just see if you can just make it more robust without having to.
Not to break protocol, because I know we're on the agenda item, but we actually, Katie and I were trying before to think through how to do that. And I know there was, I'm thinking maybe an agenda item only because there was some concern from task force members about the publicity of their names or things being. So I think maybe we have a conversation about what that structure could look like so everyone feels very comfortable about what's there.
Noted. Good point, Gina.
Absolutely. Dan, so I have a question to your question.
Sure.
What type of information were you thinking, or just making what we already have, the information that's already there, just easier to access, because it is a job to find it.
To find everything, yeah.
Right. Is that what you mean as far as
I
what
think
the
so. I
community
think
member
at
has done?
the base level, I think, yeah, how to, register for these how to read what we've been up to. Because yeah, right now it's just, there's a little, red square that says join us and a quick sentence about what we do. So for all they know, we could not be meeting. So yeah, I think at the base level but I do think as Gina just mentioned, it may be helpful just to make sure that everybody here is comfortable with what,
because I
is
actually
public.
am definitely, I have no problem saying it to this room.
Yeah.
I'm definitely one of the people who is not comfortable with having my name, address, children's name.
Yep.
There's already enough exposure out here. And
Yeah.
given some of the sensitive nature of what we are going to be getting into, I'm not comfortable with that. And I know I'm not alone. But if we're just talking about a matter of how to access where when our meetings are and meet, then absolutely. I don't have any.
We can add to the agenda, and I can maybe have like a draft of something.
Okay.
Great.
That sounds good.
And just to remind everybody, this is a public meeting, so all of our names are there. And they don't have to give contact information, but just as a reminder, our names are already there. And we do represent the community. And I think the strength and power that we show being visible as part of this committee will give the strength and power to our young people to also be visible and stand up for what's right. So just a reminder on that.
So definitely a discussion for the next agenda, Gina. Yes.
Thea has her hand up.
Oh, okay. Well,
I just wanted to just kind of piggyback on that and just say, I happened to be at the school committee meeting where the idea of the task force was brought up. And then I had emailed to say I want to be a part of it. Then I had never heard anything. And it just so happened to be that I saw at like the bottom of one of Gina Picard's email newsletters. And so then I forget sometimes, and I forget to check when the next meeting is. So it's definitely, I want to be a part of it, but I realize that I'm not in the know as much as I would like to be in terms of getting that information saying you guys are meeting. This time I made sure to actively seek it out because I missed last month. But I imagine I'm invested in this, but we're missing people that maybe would like to be a part of it and don't know. So
Sabrina?
Okay, so two things. I'm actually the president of Interact, and I've been trying to kind of convince people to see that it's a very service-oriented club, and I've been trying to convince people to see that, anti-racism is an element of service. You're serving your community members by helping them. And we're in the planning process of doing some sort of virtual meeting for Black History Month and having, different guest speakers and everything like that. And I would love to have everyone here involved and participate. We're trying to get it out to the community and have it be open to the community. Secondly, in terms of getting more people a part of the task force and everything like that, I find social media to be very helpful. So if there was a way to create an Instagram page, if there isn't already one, or kind of spread that out there. For people my age, I would say Instagram is the go-to thing. I think for more adults, Twitter is definitely something that's used, but social media has helped me so much in the past couple of months, make connections and, you know, find new people. I've been interviewing a lot of people for different things that I've done on like YouTube and stuff like that. And social media is like the main way that I've done that. And if you want to reach people, especially at like the high school level, definitely go for social media. And I'd be happy to help create something like.
Thank you. Did we have any other suggestions for agenda items? Okay, so next agenda item is our next meeting date, which if we stay in accordance with our first Wednesday would be March 3rd at 7 o'clock.
Sounds good.
So that's, I just want to double check, March 3rd. Why do I have public budget? Jane, do you have that too? Or is that a miss? So it's a backup to the no quorum on March 2nd. That's what that is. And I just a point of reference. I thought that the committee was going to focus on subcommittees in March, but I could be wrong because I know it was a long time ago that. But I just want to be careful because if we don't have a quorum on March 2nd, although maybe you all can help us get the quorum and get the word out. And we're still trying to figure out, because now there's a state election that's going to pull from us. So it's going to be very fun to figure this all out.
Right, but Gina, I'm the only school committee member, and so Dan and Maya can run it if we're not here. So I don't see why they can't meet.
Well, yeah, actually, now we have a way to do that. So that's fine. That's okay with everybody else. I hate to be late or miss, and that's fine.
Yeah, if that works, I'm happy to start the Zoom and log in through that account again. The Zoom.
Help us
the
out
Zoom
March
meeting.
2nd to get everybody there so we can make sure Lisa and I.
We'll mobilize.
So then we're good with March 3rd then? Excellent. All right. With that being said, March 3rd will be our next meeting. And
Move to adjourn.
Thank you, Joe. Heidi seconds. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Any abstentions? That looks unanimous. And I'm going to call this at 9:18.
Outstanding meeting tonight. This was.
Thank you. Oh, it really was. So much information.
Yeah.
Where did you go, Lisa?
Have a good night, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Nice to meet you. Nice to be here. Bye-bye.
Can you stay on so I know what to do with this recording?
Yep.
Oh,
I actually have a quick question for Ms. Hill. Can I have your email address or something so I can send you the link to the documentary?
All right. WAH.
Oh, hold on. Let me shut the recording.
Oh, sorry.